Hello and welcome back. If you're a new viewer, welcome. If you're an old, like I said, upload schedule is kind of random, but I did want to put out this video just because I am launching a new NFT project called Project LA365. You can find out all the details on it at la365.eth. But I'm going to jump right into explaining it in video form because I think that that's also pretty useful, and hopefully it'll give you guys a better understanding of where my head's at, where this project's going, what this project's about, why I'm sort of interested in time lapses, uh, and sort of the possibilities of where I could see this thing going in the long term if there is genuine interest from everybody watching the video in the project. So let's just get right into it, and without further ado, let's just start off at the beginning. So I've always been somebody who's been very interested in time and the temporal dimension in general, and just sort of how you can sort of mix, take a timeline, mess with it in a way that creates things like time lapses, using it to sort of make art that's unique, sort of by merging data. That's all stuff that kind of interests me for a long time. And with my background in both 3D art, programming, pipeline engineering, I have been experimenting with a lot with that, especially over the last year. Last Christmas, almost exactly a year from when I'm recording this today, I had actually started what I'm calling the Open Timelapse utility, which is going to be an open source time-lapse program written in Python that I'm going to release, and that sort of has been driving the experiments I've been doing both with the Lightroom series and now with LA365. It's sort of the backbone, and the development of that has enabled me to sort of take on a project like this. So why am I attempting a 365-day time lapse? Well, I have a pretty nice view of the city, and I do like seeing the buildings go up out there, but I don't have the ability to sort of scrub through time like I'd like to, and sort of see the city's skyline evolve over time. And just because I have been interested in time lapses for so long, I've seen a lot of them, and most of them are around the time span of a couple of hours, maybe a day, maybe a couple days, but they don't usually get much longer than that. And the ones that do, oftentimes will have like a moving camera where you kind of have to sync that back up, and it's just not always an ideal situation, at least the majority of them. So I've seen time lapses that were taken roughly from the same position that saw a city being built from the ground up over the course of like 100 years or so. Obviously, they aren't all the same photographer, um, and the result isn't perfect since the camera moved hundreds of meters between each shot, and it's sort of trying to match it up the best you can, and it's impressive. But we're getting to the point where storage is cheap enough that I can sort of just start this year-long time lapse on my own and use that data to create much more high-quality results than was previously possible. So why a whole year? Well, a whole year is, like I said, not a very common time. It's very long, and because of the length, it it is a lot more challenging than just a couple of hours or a day-long time lapse. You need to think about a lot more things. There's a lot more data being generated. It takes up a lot more time. The effort is through the roof when it is compared against hour-long time lapses and stuff like that. So it was a challenge for me, and I was excited to sort of jump at it. I don't think that I'll be able to do more than a year. I'm fronting the money for the first year, and hopefully that I'll get paid for in NFTs. But if it's not, then it's whatever. I'm okay with that. It is just sort of something that interested me, and I wanted to sort of challenge myself to accomplish that since it is a massive art project. I've never completed anything of this scale before, and I know that I can do it. So by holding myself to it and setting up this project, knowing how long it took just to set up, um, I am extremely excited about it. So about the setup. So This project is being done with a Sony a7R IV with a 90mm lens aiming at downtown Los Angeles. I'm taking a picture every 10 seconds for the entire year. That's over 8,000 pictures per day and over 3 million over the entire course of the year, which actually comes out to around 400 terabytes of raw data. So storing that is absolutely a challenge and something that I have solved at this point, but is also very expensive. On top of the month plus that I've dumped into testing and programming and planning, I've also dumped almost $8,000 into equipment for this, most of which is not going to have very good resale value, especially since a lot of that is hard drives. So like I said, I'm only planning on doing the first year out of pocket, and if there is genuine interest in this project, I do really appreciate you guys funding it, because that is going to be able to push this project further. I think that in the long run, it will become more obvious the value that it's sort of providing. So what's going to be sort of the licensing around all of this? Well, for the project itself, LA365, that brand I do kind of want to hold the rights to. However, all of the data that I'm capturing, I'm going to release at with a CC0 license, which just means it's public domain. Anybody can use it. You can sell it to other people if you can get a hold of it. The big issue is it generates the 10 pictures, or the 6 pictures per minute is generating over 100 megabit per second average data, or around there, and I only have a 40 megabit upload, so I can't even upload a single copy of all that data to the cloud in a way that anybody could access it or even provide that. So the only way for me to make that available to others is to either get more funding and take that to a data center, or if you're just a single individual who would like a copy of the data, reach out and I can sell you a copy if you send me drives, or I could buy the drives. Either way, there are ways of me to getting you that data without using the internet. But like I said, right now it's not really possible for me to make it publicly available. But any of the data that is used, you're welcome to use on your own projects. You can use it for machine learning. You can do anything that you can really think of with it. You can literally sell it to other people, like I said, because you are providing that service, and I totally understand that it's not easy to transport 400 terabytes of data, so it makes sense that you would receive compensation for that. But even more important than the raw data that's being made available, I think that the documentation that I'm going to make and the software that I'll be dumping onto GitHub will provide actually a lot more value than the raw data itself. I think sort of running into all the issues that I did setting this project up and sort of creating guides based on it so that you can attempt something like this yourself and have less headaches is something that I look forward to doing. So it's not just about the art project and the end project there in terms of a year-long time lapse. It's also about overcoming those challenges and sharing those challenges through a series of blog posts or videos or however I choose to do it, so that something like this is a lot easier in the future, as well as just sort of providing recommendations in terms of hardware, software, and providing that software actually for free, so that you can do something similar with minimal setup compared to what I had to go through. So let's talk about some of the things that I would do differently already. Well, one, I'm using a Sony a7R IV, which is not as controllable as other cameras. Some cameras have APIs that allow you to control it directly. Sony does not provide that as far as I'm aware. They do have a remote control app, and since I had the camera, I have gone through the process of creating an auto clicker that basically just goes through the UI, presses in all of the settings, records what it changed, and sort of does all of the camera adjustments that way. Obviously not ideal, would be much better to have the API, but since I don't have that, I needed to go through that workaround UI process. So in the future, I would use a different camera. Other than that, though, I think my hardware choices have been pretty spot on. I don't think that I've really made any mistakes there. I'm using a Synology NAS to store all of the data. Each one of these can be maxed out to around 300 terabytes the way that I've configured it before I need to buy like a new chassis. So I will need to do that before the end, but what I have right now will keep me good for like the first 8 months or so, and then I'll need to expand on beyond that. Let's talk about a little bit about the goals of this project from a technical standpoint. Like I said, it's a year long, so keeping uptime on anything for a full year is an extremely difficult task, and obviously can't always be guaranteed. There's this idea of how many nines of uptime do you have in the IT world, and for this project, I'm trying to provide 2 nines of uptime, which means that 99% of the time this is recording data. I don't guarantee that it'll always be live on Twitch, but it will at least be recording it to the local NAS so that the data isn't lost. And that means with 2 nines of uptime, I'm going to have up to 3.65 days of downtime throughout the year. If I were to do this for another year, I'd probably aim for 3 nines of uptime, which means about 8 hours of downtime throughout the year. But we don't need to go into that yet because that's not even begun planning yet. And most likely, I would be doing a complete hardware swap just because of the issue, like I had mentioned, where the Sony is UI only for remote control. So a little bit more tricky there. So another goal here is actually to get funding to continue this project in the long run. And the way that I've chosen to go about that is either by direct donation, whether that be like a Twitch subscription or a direct donation to my Ethereum address. Also, if you are really into the project, I'm starting an NFT project based on it. So I'm going to be minting every day as its own trading card. And beyond that, I'm also going to be doing certain time lapses. I'm not sure whether they'll be weekly, monthly, or just sort of random, maybe like around like a storm or something. Just because I'm not sure how much access to compute I'm going to have throughout this project and whether or not it'll even be feasible for me to keep up with like weekly time lapses. There's still a lot of technical challenges that I'm going to need to overcome to also do month-long time lapses. Like, there's going to be a lot of flashing if I include the nighttime, so I'm going to sort of need to pick similarly lit times of day if I'm doing something more than a week long, so that it's not as jarring to look at. But all of this stuff is going to be sort of bundled into this open time-lapse utility that I'm developing and released for the public to also sort of take advantage of all of that R&D work that I'm doing for this project. So as of right now, the only thing that I'm sort of sticking to is going to be the daily releases of the trading cards. So what's the trading card going to be? It's going to have the date there. It's going to have an image from the day. That image can be like a combination of multiple times of day, so it can be like a simulated long exposure. There'll also be a news and notes section, and what's going to be down there is news or data that I think was relevant to Los Angeles, the United States, the entire world, cryptocurrency. I'd also like to note that the background of each card is going to be generated at random based on the weather data and the average color data for that day. So each background of the card is going to be unique and it is generative. Although there will be some days where there might be a non-generative one, like say a holiday or something, or maybe like a really big event occurs, then I might have like a handmade background for some of those. But for the most part, it's going to be generative, and any of the ones that aren't generative will obviously be a lot more rare. And that data is going to be recorded there. So it's going to need a couple of days buffer time to sort of figure out what's most important to sort of put under each day and record on the card. So it's not going to be like the image drops the day that it was captured. It's going to be a couple days later, maybe even a week, so that I have that buffer time to sort of figure out what's most important and what should go underneath each image and what's relevant to each day. It may also not be every single day one gets released. It might be like 5 one day and then 2 the next, and then like a week off or whatever. It really depends on how my schedule lines up with things. So it's going to be uh, every day will have its own image, but there's not really a dedicated release schedule on that. So you're just going to need to uh, follow it on Twitter so that you're aware of when these things are releasing. And the plan for each one of these cards is to put them up for 0.05 Ethereum, which at the current Ethereum price of around $4,000, we are going to be able to sort of guarantee that this project can continue if every single one of those sells. If they're all selling like immediately, I might bump that price up, especially if sort of bots are just grabbing them and then reselling them. I don't think that those bots are adding any value. But if I see that people are buying them and holding them long term, then I may not end up increasing that floor price for the new releases. But just so you're aware, yes, 0.05 ETH is going to be the price of each image. And I hope in the long run that ends up being a great investment for you, but nothing here should be taken as investment advice. This is simply an art project, which if you want to get involved with, NFTs are probably going to be the best way to go about that, as it does provide that support to me, as well as provide you with a piece of art which can always be linked to this project. So obviously 0.05 ETH per day is actually quite a bit of money. So what am I going to be doing with that? So the plan is to sort of finish up all of the expenses that have been yet to have been paid for when it comes to completing this year-long time lapses. There's still over $10,000 worth of expenses that are going to need to be purchased, such as hard drives, in order to complete this. As of right now, I'm good up to 4 months in, but I've also already spent almost $8,000, so I'm going to be trying to recoup some of that as well after I've guaranteed that this thing can go on for a whole year. After that, I'd like to get some epic AMD servers that I can sort of experiment with the open time-lapse software that I've been developing, and maybe even open it up to viewers to suggest time lapses that I can process, since I do have local access to this data, and then send that back to them, or even just charge for compute in that way. After the Epic server, I really don't have a strong idea of what I want to do in what order, but the list of things that I'm aspiring this project to sort of enable are me being able to do a lot more development on the open time-lapse utilities to the point where I can make it a non-profit and even hire other developers to come help work on it, so that there is a fantastic piece of time-lapse software that is completely open source and anybody can use, since I don't think that there's anything like that that exists currently. Especially not for creating time lapses at a really high quality. There are like phone apps and stuff that enable you to make time lapses, but they really do have their limits when it comes to what you're going to get out of that process. I want to create something that enthusiast time lapse creators go to mess around and create their time lapses before like going to some other program for like color correction and such. So other than that, all of the big aspirations really are more centered around being able to do more of these time lapses in other cities, or maybe even like around a volcano or something. I think that that could be very interesting to sort of see it grow over the course of several years. But that's thinking a lot more down the line. Like I said, I don't really have timelines for any of those things or exact plans. I think it'd kind of be a waste of time to create timelines around something like that, considering that I'm just starting off this project and it's about to launch in 2 weeks. But if this project excites you, I would really appreciate it if you jumped on board, even if you're just watching the Twitch streams every once in a while. But even if you don't want to contribute financially, I do appreciate that you would spend time looking at this project and appreciating the work that I've put into it, because I do appreciate the fact that others connect to this, because I do I did spend a lot of time working on it, and it's been difficult, but I'm really happy with the result, and I hope that others sort of see the same thing that I'm seeing here. So I appreciate you making it all the way through this video, and I hope that it's excited you about this project as much as I'm excited about this project. And I'd love to hear from you guys, get your thoughts on what's going on, and what you think about the project, if you have any suggestions, or if you just want to say GM. You can reach out to me on Twitter at Joey_Whitman. And thank you guys for watching, liking, favoriting, subscribing, sharing this video, checking out the OpenSea collection, all of it. And I hope that 2022 is a great year for all of you.